Imagine coming home after a long day, your grocery delivery finally arriving, bags piled high on your porch, the smell of fresh bread and ripe fruit filling the air. But then you notice something shocking. Your delivery is gone, stolen by none other than the HOA Karen, who claimed there were too many bags on the porch. What would you do if someone brazenly took what's rightfully yours and got away with it? Stay tuned, because this is not just a story about stolen groceries. It's a battle for justice, respect, and standing up against entitlement. Make sure you watch until the end to see how this homeowner turned the tables and made HOA Karen face the consequences she never saw coming. If you've ever dealt with a toxic neighbor or unfair HOA drama, hit that like button and subscribe, because you won't want to miss this wild ride. The rain tapped a relentless rhythm against the window pane as I stood in the dim glow of the porch light, staring at the empty street. My breath fogged the cool glass as I waited, heart pounding a little, faster than it should. Tonight was different. The grocery delivery was late. I could hear the distant rumble of thunder, like the sky was warning me something was about to go wrong. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, smelling the wet earth and the faint scent of damp leaves carried by the breeze. The familiar hum of the delivery truck broke the silence, its headlights cutting through the darkened street like a beacon of relief. After a long week of juggling work deadlines and family chaos, the groceries arriving on time felt like a small victory. The driver pulled up and unloaded bags with practiced efficiency. I could see through the plastic the colorful fruits and fresh bread that meant comfort and nourishment for the week ahead. My hands trembled slightly as I took the bags and placed them carefully on the porch. The weight of the day seemed to lift just a bit with every bag I set down. I could finally breathe. The faint sound of water dripping off leaves mingled with the distant chatter of a few neighbors locking up for the night. Everything felt normal until it didn't. A sudden sharp knock shattered the quiet, and before I could turn around, there she was, Karen, the unofficial queen of the neighborhood, and the bane of my existence. She stood there in her raincoat, like she owned the street. Her eyes narrowed with that familiar glint of entitlement and fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp and cold. My pulse jumped as I instinctively stepped back, clutching a plastic bag tighter. "It's just my grocery delivery. I was putting it on the porch," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But she wasn't having it. "Too many bags," she snapped. "You know the HOA rules about clutter and eyesores. You can't just leave all this garbage out here for everyone to see." My mind raced. I knew the rules, but this felt different. Karen wasn't concerned about the rules, she was concerned about control. Before I could say anything more, she marched, forward, grabbing a bag from the pile and dragging it toward her. "This is ridiculous," I said, trying to wrestle the bag back, but she was surprisingly strong and determined. "I'm doing everyone a favor. You should be thanking me," she said with a sneer that made my skin crawl. I was frozen for a moment, watching my groceries disappear into her grasp. The rain had stopped, but the chill inside me only grew. "Karen, please, just give me back my stuff," I pleaded, trying to keep the rising anger in check. But she just laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Or what?" she challenged. "You gonna call the cops? Go ahead. I'll tell them you're breaking the rules." Her words were poison laced with cruelty. Around us, a few neighbors peered through their windows or paused on their way inside, whispering to each other. I felt my face flush with a mix of humiliation and helplessness. This wasn't just about groceries anymore. It was about power, and how Karen wielded it like a weapon. I could feel the weight of her eyes boring into me, daring me to fight back. But I was tired. and this battle was already slipping out of my hands. I glanced at the remaining bags on the porch, and then at the small crowd gathering at the end of the street. The unfairness of it all hit me like a wave. How had a simple delivery become a battlefield? How had my safe space turned into a stage for someone else's cruelty? I swallowed hard and tried one last time to reason, "Karen, I understand rules, but this is just groceries. It's not clutter, it's food." She shook her head dismissively. "You don't get to decide what the rules mean. I'm enforcing the standards here." Her voice dropped low but fierce. "Next time it won't just be bags. You'll regret it." I could hear the threat hanging in the air like a storm about to break. My hands clenched into fists as I realized this was far from over. Karen turned on her heel and stomped away, leaving me standing in the fading light with empty arms and a sinking heart. The porch felt colder now, the street quieter, except for the distant echo of her heels on the pavement. I looked down at the few bags left scattered like a broken promise. I wanted to scream or cry, but all I could do was stand there breathing in the damp night air and thinking about what just happened. This was the moment everything changed. The P moment. I understood that Karen wasn't just an annoying neighbor. She was a force I had to reckon with. And if I wanted my life back, I couldn't let her win. I glanced at my phone and debated calling someone the HOA board or even the police, but I knew from stories whispered in hushed tones that Karen had influence. They said she was untouchable. The thought sent a cold shiver down my spine. But standing there powerless wasn't an option either. I had to fight back somehow. But how? As I looked around the silent street, the rain began again, soft and steady, like a cleansing balm or a warning. I swallowed the lump in my throat and whispered to the night, "This isn't over, Karen." And with that, I stepped inside, locking the door behind me, with a resolve I hadn't felt all night. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one I was about to unleash. I spent the next morning staring at my phone, scrolling through the HOA contact list, hoping for some help. The cold sting of frustration settled deep inside as I dialed the number for the board president. My voice was steady, but inside I trembled as I explained what happened last night. "Karen took my groceries," I said. "She said too many bags on the porch and just grabbed them like it was her right." There was a pause on the other end that felt like an eternity before the voice replied, "We understand your concern, but Karen is very involved with the community, and these rules exist for a reason." I blinked against the growing anger. "But she stole my things. That isn't right." The reply was patient, but firm. "We appreciate your frustration, but it's important to maintain the neighborhood's appearance. Maybe next time, be more careful with deliveries." The words hit me like a slap. I thanked them quietly, but my hope was already draining away. How could the people meant to protect us side with the bully? The injustice stung sharper than the lingering ache in my hands. From the struggle, I wasn't just fighting Karen anymore. I was fighting an entire system that ignored me. Later that day, I received a note slipped under my door. It was in Karen's unmistakable handwriting, dripping with passive aggression. "Please remember the rules about clutter and keeping our community beautiful. Let's all do our part." The message was innocent on the surface, but it was a thinly veiled threat that made my skin crawl. I crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash, but her presence lingered like a shadow in every corner of my home. I felt watched, judged, and trapped in a game I didn't want to play, but couldn't walk away from. Neighbors began to take notice. Whispers floated through the neighborhood like a persistent breeze. Some glanced my way with pity, others with quiet approval of Karen's actions. It was like being caught in a storm with no shelter. One afternoon, as I stepped outside to collect the few bags still left on my porch, I found Karen standing there, arms crossed, her expression cold and triumphant. "Looks like you're learning the rules now," she said smugly. I clenched my fists, but forced a calm voice. "This isn't over, Karen." She just smiled like I was a child making empty threats. Days passed, and the tension escalated. Karen started showing up uninvited, blocking the path to my door, or staring from across the street as if daring me to lose control. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling of being watched chipped away at my peace. I reached out to some neighbors, quietly hoping for allies, but most shook their heads or said it wasn't their fight. The loneliness was suffocating. I felt like I was on a shrinking island surrounded by a sea of silence and fear. One evening, I came home to find another note taped to my door, this time more aggressive. "Stop making waves or there will be consequences. This community has standards, and you are testing them." The words were venom wrapped in polite language. Fear and anger swirled inside me. How had this situation spiraled so far? I wanted to scream, but I held the note close instead, like a grim reminder of the battle ahead. I thought about confronting Karen directly, but every encounter left me feeling smaller, weaker. I realized brute force wouldn't win this fight. I needed a plan, something smarter, something that wouldn't just push back, but break through her armor of arrogance. The idea began to form slowly, like a spark in the darkness. If Karen thought she was untouchable, she was wrong. There were ways to expose her for who she really was, ways to show the neighborhood that the villain wasn't me, but her. The thought gave me a fragile hope. I wouldn't be silent or powerless anymore. I was tired of being the victim, tired of feeling invisible. I needed to take control, even if it meant playing a dangerous game. As I stood on my porch, watching the sun dip behind the houses, casting long shadows over the street, I made a silent promise to myself. I would find a way to turn this around. Karen's reign of terror was about to meet its match. This was just the beginning. The plan took shape slowly over the next few days. I started by gathering evidence, discreetly recording Karen's antics whenever she showed up to intimidate me or snatch another delivery. My phone became my secret weapon, capturing her smug smirks and harsh words. I knew I couldn't rely on hearsay or rumors anymore. If I was going to win this battle, I needed proof. I spent hours compiling videos, photos, and notes, carefully documenting every encounter. Each clip was a piece of the puzzle, revealing Karen's true nature to anyone willing to see. One afternoon, I discovered something that changed everything. While scrolling through the neighborhood's social media group, I noticed Karen had posted a message about community standards, boasting about her enforcement efforts. She bragged about keeping the streets clean and making sure no one got away with breaking the rules. The post was dripping with self-righteousness, but it also gave me an opening. If she was so proud of her actions, why not let everyone see the whole truth? I decided to respond publicly with my own story, backed by the evidence I had gathered. The floodgates opened. Neighbors started commenting with their own experiences of Karen's overbearing behavior. Stories poured in of stolen packages unjust, fines and threats thinly veiled as helpful advice. The narrative was shifting. Karen's carefully constructed image was cracking under the weight of real voices and real proof. The social media group became a battlefield with passionate arguments and heated debates, but most importantly, it became a platform for justice. I was no longer alone, and the community's blind loyalty to Karen was faltering. Meanwhile, Karen's arrogance grew. She posted defiant replies, dismissing the accusations as lies and slander. She claimed she was protecting the neighborhood from chaos and that anyone opposing her was a troublemaker. Her words only fueled the fire, making her look even more tyrannical. It was clear she underestimated how much power truth and unity could hold. I watched from the sidelines, knowing that the more she pushed, the harder her fall would be. I took the next step and contacted the local authorities with my evidence. I filed a formal complaint about the theft of my groceries and the ongoing harassment. The officer I spoke with was sympathetic and promised to investigate. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of relief. Justice wasn't just a dream. It was within reach. I also reached out to a neighborhood lawyer who offered to help me navigate the HOA rules and make sure Karen faced consequences. I wasn't just fighting with words anymore. I had the law on my side. The tension reached a boiling point the day Karen showed up again trying to grab a package I had left on the porch. This time, I was ready. I calmly recorded her as she argued, with me loudly accusing me of breaking rules and disrupting the peace. I kept my voice steady, despite the anger burning inside. I had learned to hold my ground. As she grew more aggressive, I called the police and neighbors gathered, watching the confrontation unfold. The sight of the badge changed everything. Karen's face flushed with rage and disbelief, but there was no escaping the consequences this time. When the officers arrived, they took statements from both of us and reviewed the video evidence on my phone. Karen's defiance crumbled under the weight of proof. She was arrested on the spot for theft and harassment, leaving the neighbors stunned into silence. The street that had felt so hostile suddenly held a cautious hope. I watched as Karen was led away, her arrogance replaced by shame and fear. The victory was mine, but it was also the community's. Together we had taken down a tyrant. As the sun set, casting a golden light over the neighborhood, I stood on my porch, feeling a mix of exhaustion and triumph. The fight had been long and hard, but justice had been served. The scars of the battle would fade, but the memory of standing up for myself and my community would stay forever. I smiled quietly, knowing this was just the beginning of a new chapter where respect and kindness would finally have a place. And deep inside, I whispered to the night, "You messed with the wrong person, Karen." The days after Karen's arrest felt surreal, like the neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting to see what would come next. The air that had once been thick with tension now carried a cautious hope that maybe things could change. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on the porch, watching neighbors who had once avoided me now nod politely or even stop to say hello. The silent walls between us were crumbling slowly but surely. Karen's shadow had lifted, revealing a community desperate for peace and fairness. One afternoon, the HOA called an emergency meeting. The room was packed with anxious faces whispering behind closed doors. I arrived just as the meeting started and took a seat near the back, trying not to draw attention. The president nervously opened the floor, addressing the fallout from Karen's arrest. "We need to restore trust," she said, "and make sure our community rules are fair and transparent." The words sounded hollow after everything that had happened, but there was a flicker of sincerity I hadn't expected. As the discussion unfolded, several neighbors stepped forward, sharing stories about feeling bullied, ignored, or powerless under Karen's reign. Their voices trembled with emotion, but carried a strength born from survival. I listened closely, realizing this was more than just about me. This was about a community reclaiming its soul. Slowly, the conversation shifted from blame to healing, from anger to hope. The power that Karen had wielded was replaced by a collective determination to build something better. Later that week, I received a message from one of the neighbors who had been silent before. She thanked me quietly for speaking out, saying I had given her courage to stand up as well. Her words struck me deeply, reminding me why I fought so hard. It wasn't just about groceries or stolen packages, but about dignity, respect, and the right to live without fear of harassment. The small victories were pieces of a larger mosaic, forming a new reality. Meanwhile, Karen's fate unfolded in the courtroom. The evidence was overwhelming, and the judge showed no mercy. She was ordered to pay restitution and community service and was barred from any HOA activities or properties. The once arrogant woman who had ruled with intimidation was now a cautionary tale whispered among neighbors. Her social media accounts were flooded with mocking memes and viral posts exposing her cruelty. The karma was real and undeniable. One evening, I walked past Karen's old house, now quiet and empty. The freshly painted fence and manicured lawn were a stark contrast to the chaos she had left behind. I felt a surge of satisfaction knowing that justice wasn't just about punishment, but about reclaiming peace. The neighborhood was healing, and so was I. The lessons learned were etched deep inside me, a reminder that courage and persistence could topple even the most stubborn tyrants. As I closed the door behind me that night, I smiled to myself, recalling the final moments when Karen's arrogance had crumbled in front of everyone. The look of disbelief as she realized the walls were closing in. The applause from the neighbors who had stood by my side. The sound of the police car pulling away. It was a symphony of justice played perfectly in tune. I whispered again, "You lost Karen, but we all won." The street was quiet now, but my heart was loud with victory.